We now return to Let's Play Suzerain. What's going on in the sword here? United Kantana Embassy helped protesters. Around midnight, Red Youth protesters clashed with young swords at the Visord city center, resulting in many injuries. The counter-protesters were cornered in front of the United Kantana Embassy after they were pushed back by the police. The embassy opened its doors and Red Youth members escaped inside. The police are still waiting outside the building for the return of Red Youth members. It's fun. Our economy has taken a little bit of a dip here. Alright. Arcasia develops the first ICBM. Intelligence reports that Arcasia has successfully completed the Missile 4, an intercontinental ballistic missile which has the estimated capability to accurately destroy targets at thousands of kilometers range. Arcasian missile capabilities have significantly increased, posing a threat to territories that are further away from western Mercopa. Alright, let's react to the unrest, I guess. A decision to address the instability in the nation. The political situation around the country has escalated. Chief Strategist Lucian Gallade has prepared several action plans that we can execute. What will we do to address the intensifying political climate? I mean, this is going to do nothing. Expanding the police would probably be a good idea, but it's not solving the root of the problem, which would be visiting the towns and finding out exactly what each of them needs. You know, the whole making them heard kind of thing. Let's do this one. Visit the affected towns in person. President Rayne talks to protesters. President Anton Rayne visited towns around Greater Holsword and Gruney regions, which were heavily affected by the protests and riots that popped up around the country, triggered by the death of Circus. He was seen talking to the protesters and listening to the concerns of the citizens. This sends a powerful message to Swordish citizens that the government is walking among them and listening to their problems. Holsword is desperately trying to restart Sordland's economy after the recession, and this political unrest is not helping, said a Swordish scholar and professor of law at Holsword State University in Holsword. Okay, so that didn't actually seem to do anything. End of the day at the Maroon Palace. It was late in the evening. The Maroon Palace was finally getting somewhat quiet when I returned to my office at the top. I eagerly approached my chair and sprawled out on it. It had been an exhausting day, just like every day since I took office. Lean back and relax. I stretched out my arms, leaned back in my chair, and took a deep breath. Holsword's skyline was daunting, but beautiful. I glanced downwards out the window and saw Sergei and the guards waiting for me by the main gate. I heard a couple of knocks on the door. My secretary, Olivia Suno, entered. Mr. President, Mr. Tusk is here to see you. You had a meeting with the Lotharberg spokesman. I'm so sorry for not giving you proper notice. Well, maybe we can postpone the meeting. I mean, don't worry about it's the friendly thing, but like, this is a big meeting. Having some notice and some friends, you know, I don't enjoy being cornered in the office here. Let's see about this one. He's already here, Mr. President. What do you want me to tell him? After a moment, Mr. Tusk swaggered into the room. I'd met Sordland's most prominent businessman once or twice, but never alone. He had large jowls, blindingly shiny shoes, and the air of someone who was used to getting his way. Anything to drink, Mr. Tusk? Water? Whiskey? Cognac. Preferably from before you were born, sweetheart. I'll check the supply room. Olivia backed out of the office, shooting me an apologetic look as she did so. Walter hung up his hat, which I could see was lined with mink. He fixed me with a long, hard stare, then broke into a toothy grin. Good evening, Mr. President. I'm here to congratulate you. We both sat down. My business partners and I wish you a successful term as leader of our nation. Thank you, Mr. Tusk. I had no chance to say this at the ball with all the panic. but we are very much looking forward to working with you. Thank you. I'd like to build a profitable relationship between us. That being said, there are some concerns of mine and the people I represent, which I would like to take this opportunity to clear up. What are these concerns? The ruined state of the economy in Sordland has influenced everyone. The recession hit all of us hard. Walter pulled out a box of cigars from his jacket. I had these brought from Lesbia, the best cigars in the whole continent. Would you like to try one? Go ahead, I don't want to smoke. Walter grabbed himself a cigar and lit it. He looked out towards the city's scenery as he puffed away. I heard that you purchased stock from Armandine Industries in Arcasia. Smart buy. They're developing new gadgets that are going to be profitable. Spend money to make money, they say. Let's see if it holds true. You'll be surprised at what one can achieve given the resources in capitalism. I will buy a couple of thousands of shares too to expand my portfolio. Hope the investments pay off for both of us, Mr. President. His eyes wandered away for a moment. You're having a good start to the term, for sure, besides the recent troubles. Glad that you've decided to promote the free market, which is the only thing that can get us out of this mess. I mean, we could just pass the buck and say it's the team's advice and not my idea. That means maybe that I'm not fully on his side. He's just going to pull out the tried excuse that, well, your conditions weren't right. We use this one. I took favorably to my economic team's advice. You had talented economists like Mr. Hull in the cabinet, so you made the right choice. There are many other avenues where we could work together. He grinned. The high-speed rail investment was a great decision. The business logistics will improve and boost the economy once finished. The greater Holsword and Gelsword regions needed better links. Connecting our largest two economic powerhouses was the right call to make. We can be close allies. The group can help you get Sordland out of the recession, which will be the key problem to solve in your term and could even determine your re-election. Let's start with a gesture of goodwill. Soon the investment project contract will be awarded to one of the three main contenders. He pulled out a check out of his pocket and slid it toward me on the table. My personal bank details were listed on it with a deposit of 500,000 Sordish Ren ready to be transferred. This was 6 months of a president's salary. If the contract is somehow awarded to Underhall Construction, they would not only work hard and deliver, but also do it on time. Now, what do you think, Mr. Rayne? Wouldn't that be good? He put his index finger on the check. There was a noise by the door. Livia Suno was standing there holding a tray with a bottle and 2 glasses. I'm so sorry, Mr. Tusk, but all I could find was a 1942 Savigny. Savigny? Yeah, I hope that's acceptable. She quickly put the tray on my desk and walked out. Tusk eyed her as she left. Remind me to visit your office more often. Now, where were we? Do we have a deal? No, I'll make my own decision. Walter sighed and pulled the check away, putting it in his pocket. Thank you for the visit nonetheless. It was good to share opinions, and we will meet again in the future for sure. Oh, I almost forgot. Please say hello to Mr. Caronte for me. He smiled. Have a good evening, President. Walter stood up, grabbed his jacket, and made his way towards the door. He closed the door behind him. I gathered my things and prepared to finally head home. As I walked out, I noticed Livia still there, covering up her typewriter for the evening. If I may be so bold, Mr. President, did you accept his offer? It's absolutely none of your business. Of course I didn't. How could you even ask me that? The other girls have told me about all kinds of dealings that went on during the Alfonso administration. I wasn't sure if you were that kind of president. I most certainly am not. She and I took a moment to look out over the lights of the city before heading to the elevators. Okay. Kibner suggests expanding executive powers. The leader of the NFP, Casaro Kibner, has suggested that the new constitution should expand executive powers, adding fuel to the debate over the possibility of reforming the 1929 constitution. He pointed out the current dire situation of Sordland and emphasized the need for a strong leadership. The current constitution suggests the division of executive power between the cabinet and the president, who has no immunity before the courts for acts of treason and unconstitutional behavior during office. In the system suggested by the NFP, the president would have absolute immunity before the courts, and it is the president who would chair the cabinet. It is not clear yet whether this suggestion would spark further debate in the Reform Committee from the PFJP and USP. The PFJP proposal had suggested that the president should have no presidential decrees, might result in the abolishment of the assembly and take the country to an early election, despite the independents' counter-proposal to give similar power to the parliament to take down the president. But that detail was not shared with the press in yesterday's press conference. Lockhaven Times. Reform demands gain popularity. Demands for reform are gaining more popularity than ever. Latest public opinion reports show that the majority of the Sordish people want changes in the governmental structures that were established during Tarquin Sol's military coup in 1929. The public trust in the Grand National Assembly and the Supreme Court is at an all-time low. While rumors of reform talks are coming out of the Assembly, it seems unlikely that without complete unity, none of the parties would be able to lead such a proposal. In order to change the Constitution, the proposal must collect at least 150 signatures and then reach the needed 166 votes. If the proposal passes the Assembly, it is still subject to another vote in the Supreme Court as well as judicial review, which still stands as the biggest obstacle before the parties. Yeah, really, I mean, how does that work? Like, there's absolutely no checks and balances in that if the Supreme Court can just say, yeah, we're not changing this. Can we override their veto? I mean... The pro-minority Workers' Party of Bludia rally in the Bludish majority city of Suzerain attracted a large audience. The gathering was heavy on flags and banners whipping in the rain and chill wind as the gatherers declared solidarity with Bernard Circus. Among the speakers at the rally was Mansoon Leek, a Bludish member of Assembly who was standing as leader of the Independents in the Grand National Assembly. Although not a member of the WPB, he was the leading figure of the event. "We will again foil this war plot that was set up by the Solist ideology," he said, in reference to the series of conflict and bloodshed during Tarquin Sol's term as president, which claimed thousands of Bludish lives. "We will come out of this tunnel of conflict. We will not only win against discrimination, we will win the truth. When we have all together foiled this trick of polarization, our songs of peace, which spread from Izam, will ring out even stronger all over Sordland," Leek added, in reference to the Izam incident in 1933, which triggered Tarquin Sol's persecution of Bludish minorities and the formation of the militant organization the Bludish Freedom Front. Bludish citizens targeted. 20 Bludish citizens were attacked by a group of people suspected to be members of the Young Swords during their peaceful protest to support Bernard Circus. The group was overwhelmed and the local police forces couldn't reach the protesters to protect them amidst the chaotic crowd. Attackers ran away without getting caught, and 11 of the victims were hospitalized with critical injuries. Maybe I should have gone with the police instead. Okay, we don't need that. Alright, what do we have here? Narble. Situation report. The Ministry of Defense reports that the situation along the border is getting tense. Rumberg's Southern Army was sighted training close to our borders and did not respond after we issued a radio message. The Chief of the Armed Forces, General Kruger, reports to have increased patrolling duties along the northern border to signal readiness. Why do I feel like something's going to happen before I have a chance to do anything? So Conrad, I'm willing to bet that is what's-his-face, Enrica, let's look at this here. Local police working with nationalists, oh that's great. One of our agents acting as a Young Swords member had an encounter with 2 members of the local police force in Enrica, Alcim Balar and Vic Nezi. According to the report, the policeman tried to bribe the agent to burn down a store that belongs to a known Communist Party member and to instigate further violence. We've detained the policeman on charges of corruption. Finalization of the contract. Okay. Let's see if a meeting with Marcel Caronti. Economic Relief Plan, an act to ease the economic hardship felt in the country. This seems the safer thing, to be honest. With the assistance of the National Business Council and the Central Bank, Simon Hall put forward a countrywide relief plan to mitigate the economic hardships that are being felt. We can either provide stimulus checks for everyone in need or bail out businesses under serious financial strain or decide not to approve the plan. Well, I mean, you always give checks to the people because the people spend it. And if the people are spending it, that bails out the businesses. So, yeah. We're getting very close to being in deficit. That's not so great. Alright, we're going to do this, though. Provide checks. Economists, unemployment and checks. The administration has fallen for populism and the idea that giving people money will solve the problems of the economy overall. It is hard to grasp where these ideas come from, especially when long-term job growth and employment is what this country needs to secure in order to have a stable economy. What is the plan here? People will be able to pay their rents for a few months, and then they will fall into the same unemployment trap due to a lack of job availability or security. Businesses can't carry all the weight of the declining economy on their own shoulders, and employ people without help from the government. The administration needs to reevaluate their way out of the recession with realistic methods. Economic Relief Act. We've passed a relief act to tackle the economic difficulties going through the country. Stimulus checks distributed. Government supported citizens in need with stimulus checks, allowing them to pay for food and rent. Relief helped millions of people. Okay. Well, let's go talk to this guy first, shall we? Presidential state car on the road to Conriat. We were headed to the meeting location set by Marcel Caronte. The motorcade was made up of the most confidential and trustworthy team. After a few hours of driving along River Escal, we took a turn before entering Conriat. The darkness started setting in as we drove up to a hill. Now, where are we, Sergei? We are nearing the HOS Country Club, Mr. President. We'll be there shortly. We arrived and the big iron gates of the country club opened. It was huge and outright extravagant. The main building, inspired by lesbian architecture, was lit from all sides. It was rather chilly. I was approached by Peter Vectern and Lucien Gallet. I hope the journey was comfortable. I mean, that is kind of heavy on my mind at the moment, I suppose. I'll just be somewhat neutral about it, though. The location is very remote indeed. It's a very exclusive country club for people who value their privacy. We entered the main building. After opening the marble-engraved wooden door, we were greeted by two tall women. The receptionists led us to the meeting room upstairs. Marcel was standing by the window looking outside at the beautiful complex. He turned around to have a quick look at both of us. He was a really handsome man with fair hair. Fair hair, you say? He walked towards me with his hand reached out for a handshake. I shook his hand. He had a firm grip. It's such a pleasure to meet you in person, Mr. Caronte. I appreciate your efforts to reach out for a mutually beneficial friendship. Thanks for hosting us. I admired your father very much. May he rest in peace. Welcome. Your kind words have touched me, Vice President. He was indeed a great man. Please accept our condolences. We are saddened. Are we? He would have been very happy to hear this from you, Mr. President. It's time to look forward. Let's talk about our bright future. All right, let's have a seat. Marcel gently pointed at the seats. We sat down around a gigantic table. Before speaking, he knocked on wood. The past months have been tumultuous, to say the least. I'm glad you and your family were unharmed at the shooting. The whole incident must have been a shock for the kids. They aren't used to what we lived through back in the late 20s. I still remember when my father took us out of the country when it became too dangerous in Conriat. They were startled, but the important thing is they're safe and sound. Of course, that is all that matters. No family should suffer from tragedy ever again. We've had enough of that. Well, I am known to be a straightforward person, so let me get to the point without wasting your valuable time. It was during the Alfonso campaign when I was struck by what you have done within the party. Marcel started to look at one of the paintings at the wall. Guess I'll look at the painting. Observe the painting. The famous piece depicted a giant sleeping beneath a village. The trees, rivers, and hills were all part of the giant's body. Its eyes were two caves looking up at the people. It showed daylight at the far left and night time at the far right. The giant seemed to be watching the village. It was totally unbeknownst to the villagers. Marcel pointed his finger at me. You said we will transform this nation, Mr. Rayne. My conglomerate has a way of doing things, and I don't want them to change. So, I want to cooperate with you. Please explain further. You might have the people's support now, Mr. President, but what happens when you make mistakes? Everybody makes mistakes. What is that supposed to mean? Let's hear his point, Vice President. Being a president in this country means having many enemies, enemies that would resort to anything to bring you down. Let's say these enemies caused a scandal or leaked sensitive information from the administration. These would be destructive when they were released. If they were released. Continue. Assume that the articles would actually protect your integrity no matter what. Try to imagine how up to 5 million people I reach will not lose faith in you. And you're not just being nice, are you? I want two things, Mr. President. Number one is a guarantee from you that the Rayne administration won't meddle in HOS affairs no matter what happens. Number two is a simple gentleman's favor for the future. Let me prove my services to you first, and I'm sure you won't disapprove when the time comes. This is far too risky for me. Great risk means great reward. This mutually beneficial cooperation will help you greatly. I can guarantee that you will see its benefits sooner than later. We can make history together, if we dare to challenge the odds. What do you think about this, Lucian? Lucian leaned to my ears and whispered, I think it's a good deal. He's right, we'll need the media support. With his newspapers and channels on our side, we can dodge a lot of bullets. The one thing that bothers me, though, is his favor request. We do not know what it is, and he could ask for something that could point fingers at us. Exactly. Marcel interrupted us. So, do we have a deal? Mr. Caronte, I have to reject. Such a shame, Mr. President, and here I thought we were going to be good friends. It's a shame, really. Goodbye, Mr. Caronte. Let's leave. We left the complex and entered the car. I thought that would have ended better. Well, he did try and push it too far, but we kind of knew what he was going for. I mean, it really was your idea, Lucian. Let's not cause internal squabbling here. He pushed it too far. The threats were unacceptable. Return to Holsword. Alright. Read the report from Holsword. Kisaro Kibner demands emergency to be called. The leader of the NFP, Kisaro Kibner, has demanded an emergency to be called to address the increasing political violence in the country. He stated that without a declaration of emergency, Sordland would be destabilized and the integrity of the country would be damaged even further. Yeah. I very much do not want anyone having a sort of Damocles over me here. So we'll just have to try and not make scandals, although being head of a media monopoly, he can make scandals, and that's the downside to this. But I feel like this game is just one that we're not going to win, you know. This is, it kind of reminds me, mildly, I mean, the premise is very thinly the same as Rogue State. Rogue State was a game where you were meant to just keep the country together for 5 years. And, you know, thinking about it as a game, you want to think that you as a player are going to matter, but I kind of feel like with all the shit that's just happening and all that, that's kind of our job. You know, like, it's much more realistic in the sense that this game kind of expects you just to, well, not fuck up the country. And eventually, you will not have office anymore, and life in this universe will go on without you. You know, we can't solve all the problems, I think, is the thing. I get the feeling that this is not one of those games where if you choose all the right things, then, you know, you live happily ever after. This is just one of those, you know, don't make things worse during your term, and then it all goes on. Yeah, we'll save this for next time. I want to keep some shorter episodes from now on, just because I want to be able to catch up on the extra videos I've been doing, reading all the lore and whatnot. I don't want to get way ahead of those videos, so I'm going to try and keep these shorter until we're sort of through the codex and all this stuff, and then we'll come back, and maybe by that time we'll be totally finished. We're still in Chapter 1, though. That's really weird. I don't know how many chapters there are. This may be a very long game. Anyway, I'm going to end this one here. I'll see you next time.